Test 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Licensing and Hearing Committee meeting on February 16th, 2024. I will now call on the committee clerk to conduct the roll call, please.
Regional Chair Redmond,
Present.
Councillor Erb,
Present.
Chair Foxton,
Present.
Councillor Hunick,
Present.
and Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Thank you.
I'd now like to do the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Shinaatin peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. Now is there any declaration of community interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none. Report 4.1, taxi fare increase and new dispersal formula for the Accessible Taxi Fund. I'd now like Thomas to take over. Thomas, please.
Thank you very much.
Can't hear him.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Today I brought a report forward to deal with two separate things. The first being an increase in the meter drop that the brokers have requested to increase from $350 to $450. And the second item covers three areas regarding the dispersal of our accessible fund, which would increase the amount of money we give to taxi script, change the formula for funding accessible vehicles, and also increase the amount of subsidy on a per ride basis. I'll skip the highlight, but the rate itself keeps in line with other municipalities, so it's not going beyond what anybody else is charging for the initial fare on a taxi, so we didn't have any issue recommending that. The Accessible Fund Dispersal Plan was a different matter. We first put forward a plan back in 2021, I believe it was. And it covered essentially the same areas. We looked at providing money to taxi scripts. So these are funds that people can use to pay for accessible rides. We decided that we would, at that time, try to support van owners by paying up to $10,000 to convert a vehicle into an accessible van. And we also provided a $2 a ride subsidy to the owners as well to help cover the service. Over time, we came to the conclusion that it wasn't filling the brokers' needs. I had a meeting with them last fall, and a couple of things have changed. First of all, vehicle prices are much higher now than they had been. Dodge has stopped making the Caravan, which is the staple that they had used. It was a less expensive van. And now they have to use a Toyota, which is much more expensive, and their operating costs regarding insurance continues to climb. So by changing the formula, we sort of changed the way we support them. It acknowledges, when we say $40,000 over 5 years, we acknowledge in that the higher price of the vehicle and the conversion fee itself. So in the first year, we would provide $10,000 upon receipt of the vehicle invoice. And then every year, including that one after for 5 years, there would be $500 a month or $6,000 as a means of defraying some of their costs around the vehicle. It would also bring the vehicle down to around the cost of what a normal sedan would cost, and therefore it didn't put them at any disadvantage to other owners who didn't provide that service. When we look at the amount of money that we were taking in from Uber and the calculations that we did with finance, we felt that we could then increase the amount of funds that we supply to Mobility Plus. So we would bring that up by $15,000 to $55,000. And the per ride subsidy, we could increase to $5 a ride, which would come into about $150,000 a year if it's all claimed, whereas right now it's sitting at probably about $56,000 a year. So we thought in doing that and in talking to the brokers that this was kind of more in line with the support that they needed to entice owners to undertake an accessible van. And it's something that they wanted to see as a means of bolstering the number of accessible vans they had. So 3 of the companies in the region are more often than not compliant with the 7% number in the bylaw. We have one broker who is chronically short. When we started to discuss a different framework for dispersal of the funds, they started to say, well, they've got a lot more interest in it, and if this is something that they could put into play, then they could probably get up to 3 or 4 more vans on the road, which would bring us up to 21 or 22, which would be at the 7% number, give or take, by a van. So in working with them, we felt that this sort of change would be the kind of enticement that they needed. It was also providing incentive for people who already owned vans to invest in another one, to keep going rather than just reverting to regular service. And, you know, the time will tell whether that actually pans out, but the response has been good. The response has been favorable, and there's agreement that they would take up on it. So we feel that with some confidence we could, at the very least, increase by a couple of vans the number that we have on the road at this time. Uber, their revenue fell during the pandemic substantially. It has since climbed, I think, beyond pre-pandemic levels, so that the funds that we bring in that they pay for not providing accessible services has grown this year, and we feel that it will probably project into growth over the next few years as well. So this is fundable for 10 years, at least at its current state, without running out of funds. So we're safe in making that a viable program. But it's also something that we can reevaluate in a couple of years, like we did with this one, to see if anything has changed and anything that we can do that would address that. So I don't know if anyone has any questions regarding that plan or how we're going to enact it.
Councillors, any questions? I don't see any. Oh, I see Chantel, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am in favor of increasing the drop rate, and I'm in favor of increasing the grant for accessible vans from $10,000 to $40,000 per van. I'm just wondering where the idea of increasing the taxi script allowance from 40 to 50,000 or 40 to 55,000, excuse me, came from. Was that feedback from the disability community that there needed to be more taxi scripts?
No, through the chair, this was something that we decided to contribute more to. We decided to take a block of the funds originally 3 years ago to support some of this. And the funding that we provide is a small portion that actually goes into the taxi script program. And it's something, again, that we would evaluate over time to see if we can provide more funds. It's not something that we would take away funds from. We would maintain at the $55,000 level now.
Oh, I thought it was increasing from 40 to 55. Do I have that incorrect?
No, it is increasing from 40 to 55. We have been giving $40,000 a year for the past 3 years. And this year we'll be increasing it by 15,000 and every year forward.
Okay, so I'm just not sure where the reasoning to increase it came from.
I'm sorry?
I'm just not sure where the reasoning to increase it came from. Like,
well, we thought it is a way to support people who use accessible services. And we just thought that we had the money, we could put more money into that pot so that it could be used. Because I think it does at some point run out.
All right. I'll ask others, sir. Let others ask their questions. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Fox, and fangled, I have to push the button. I'm really pleased to see that you're working with the taxi and the rideshare industry, and I really support the recommendations because it seems to me we're sort of joint problem solving, and I like that. Can you just remind us why Uber and Lyft Levy are the only 2 ride shares? Did they have to register? Do they have some kind of access that other ride share corporations or organizations have? I'm just wondering why they're the only 2 listed.
Yes, through the chair, those are the only 2. We actually have Ride On as well, but they're not really functional at the moment. So those are the only 2 that we have licensed in the region from that vein. And then we base the funds that we take on the level of service that they provide.
Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Chair Foxton. I support the direction you're taking with this as well. Is the script and the conversion programs, is that common in other municipalities? Is it unique to Waterloo Region? And like, if it's not unique to us, how do we always ask, how do we compare to other municipalities?
Sure. So not every municipality does this. Some take the entire portion of the money they take from Uber and just put it back into licensing. Some do divert the funds to like a subsidy as well, like a per ride subsidy, I believe they do in Hamilton. And I think they do support some of the conversion costs. So there's nothing standard across municipalities in the province. So some don't do anything and others do as we're doing.
And a second one, if I may. So like for a conversion program as well, we don't upfront the money to the taxi or the operator. We pay it after the conversion. Is that the way I think that's what you said, or?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Through the chair. They supply us with the invoice and then we can verify that it is what it is that we're paying for. And then we also say that that van we disperse that $6,000 a year on a monthly basis because we want to ensure that that van is on the road. So if we're not getting any service from that van, if they're not saying, well, we didn't have any ride subsidies in that month, we would not be paying them the $500 to underwrite the cost of the vehicle.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense too, with the caravan not being available anymore and the increased cost, and so that we're recognizing that difference as well. So good work.
Yes, part of the other problem is that other vans that are made are not suitable for the equipment that needs to go inside. So the inside dimensions are too small, which is why they're having to go to the Toyotas.
Thank you.
Councillor Nowak.
Yeah, just very briefly, we haven't dealt with these issues in some time, so I just need a little refresher. The taxi script program, how are those funds dispersed? I mean, I'm just a little foggy on that. I should know it, I guess, but.
Yeah, so through the chair, the fund is operated by, I believe it's GRT Mobility Plus, and they would have a list of people who are to be eligible to purchase scripts. So it's a 50% kind of thing. You pay 50% of the amount that you're getting. So if you get $10, you're paying $5, and we are giving you $5 to use as script for taxis or transportation.
Yeah, no, that. One more question. Thank you for that. One more question. The one taxi firm that wasn't coming up to speed or didn't have the 7%. Is there any way of other than incentive, providing the incentive, is there any way of just sort of ensuring that they follow through and get that 7%? Is there any penalty or?
Through the chair, it would be a violation of the bylaw because we have stated it needed to be 7% of their licensed fleet. However, with the pressures on the industry over the last 5 years or so and the cost of insurance going up anywhere between, say, $15,000 a year average, but sometimes up to $20,000 a year, we didn't feel it was a positive way of trying to get compliance from them. I think that those portions of the bylaw need to be looked at again to become more explicit regarding what our expectations are. Right now, the bylaw merely says that we have to have 7% of fleet, but that doesn't indicate how often that van needs to be on the road. And it also doesn't cover service levels as well. So having vans on the road every day, or whether there are specific days where they need to be on more than others. So there are, I think, a few areas that we need to look at is regarding that 7% number. And I don't know that we can necessarily regulate that into compliance through the bylaw, but I think by making it more explicit, we would be able to have a better footing with which to push on them in general.
Can you give me one more, Chair?
Of course.
Is there a backlog? Are there people that just aren't getting rides because there's not the number of vehicles?
Yes.
Yes, through the chair, we've had complaints about that. And again, the bylaw is silent on any kind of service standards. So wait times, number of vans on the road if you've got, say, 5 vans, you should probably have at least 2 on in every 12-hour period, maybe 3 in the day, 2 overnight. So there's nothing in the bylaw that would actually stipulate the service level standards that we'd be looking for. And I think some of that would require studies. We'd have to look at their data regarding when these rides are coming in, what is going on in their company. Do they have a driver sick? Is the van out of commission? Like, there's a lot of working and moving parts that, you have to kind of tinker with the whole thing to see if we can't get that up to snuff.
Well, I'd appreciate some tinkering.
The bylaw is 6 years old now, or going on 7 years old. So it's certainly time, I think, to reevaluate that portion of it at least.
Yeah.
Because it is more chronic in need than the general other terms of the bylaw. So that might be a focus where we could amend the bylaw regarding some of our accessible provisions.
I will look forward to a future report then. Thank you.
Councillor Hunick.
Chair, Mr. Hudassen brought up a really good point about the bylaw not specifying anything in regard to service levels, and I would like to see that as the taxi companies are required to have non-accessible services available 24 hours a day, there be access to a van 24 hours a day. And I don't mean that van drivers have to stay up all night and get no calls, but if there could be someone on call in case of emergency. I've heard of members of the public not being able to get a ride home from the hospital, for example, until 7 a.m., even if they get there at 2 o'clock in the morning, that kind of thing. And so I do think the bylaw needs to be revisited. Mr. Hudassen, can you brief us on what's required to make amendments to the bylaw?
So through the chair, I believe that what we would do is work with legal to look at the provisions that we wanted to put in there. They would have to be enforceable. They would have to be within our jurisdiction to require. And then consultation with the taxi companies, not necessarily to give them a veto power over what we're doing, but to try and work with them to make the provisions workable. And but at some point, we have to say, look, this is the expectation of service. This is what we need you to do. You need to figure out a way to do it. Maybe we can help you do that. But the bottom line is we require, at least 1 van on call overnight from each broker in order
or
to
even
make
one,
this work.
even one broker. They can take turns. But I think the problem right now is that there are none available, which can lead to emergency situations.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that if our bylaw was more explicit regarding this, we would have a little bit more control over what was happening.
On that note, also regarding the bylaw, how was the 7-cent auxiliary taxi penalty decided on? I find that very low. Uber can have 100 rides, for example, and only contribute $7 to the accessible taxi fund. How would we go about amending that?
Through the chair, I believe that number was set during the initial licensing period when they were looking at the fees to levy, and we didn't have a lot to look at that time, as my understanding. I think we were the 3rd municipality in Canada to do it. So, again, other municipalities don't charge the same way that we do. There's some municipalities that just charge them 1 fee, and then they take that and either use some of it for accessible funds or they pour it all back into licensing. Or some like us break it up into 2 areas where we have the licensing fee that they pay per ride and the 7% that they pay per ride for lack of accessible service. So we would need to look at that and again, I'll amend the bylaw through the fee schedule.
Okay.
The charges that we have.
I've spoken a lot, Chair Foxton, but I have one more question that I would like to ask.
Carry on, please.
Thank you. I noticed that part of the accessibility fund is redirected back to GRT for accessible vehicles. While I love GRT and I know that accessible vehicles is a fundamental part of our services, I think the accessible taxi fund should be used for alternative accessible options. And so I'm wondering how much of the accessible taxi fund is redirected to GRT for vehicles, and what would be the impact of redirecting that to taxis specifically?
Through the chair, currently to my knowledge, no money is being redirected to GRT Mobility Plus except the $55,000 for the script. Prior to the previous plan in 21, there were some one-off fundings where we helped pay for the cost of one of the small Mobility Plus buses, and I think we did that twice.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps I read that in the appendices and didn't realize it was from an older date. Thanks very much.
So, Council, if I may recap, we are going to ask Tom and his group to look into the bylaw for more explicit regarding the 7%, et cetera. Is there any other request to staff? And then we'll bring forward the motion, and I'll need a mover and seconder. Any other questions for staff?
I'm just wondering, Councillor Foxton, I don't know how dangerous or good this would be, but I'm noticing that none of the taxi companies are represented here today, and I'm wondering if it would be prudent to have them in attendance, to have them speak to whether or not they're okay with this plan before we affirm it.
Are you talking in regards to the motion?
Yes.
I believe in our report, if I read it correctly, that you did meet with them in October of 2023 or September.
Yes, sure.
And this recommendation came from the taxis.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to be sure of that.
If there's no other questions, moved by Councillor Erb. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Honig, and do you need it read again?
No.
Okay. And all those in favor, please vote now.
I'm in favor. I haven't got my WhatsApp up.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
And I believe that's carried. So next is information correspondence. Amy Ross, correspondence has been received for information. Additional correspondence that was received after the release of the addendum agenda will be included in the meeting's minutes. Is there any further business? Oh, before we do that, if I may, when I was on GRAC, and I also sat on the Mobility Plus Committee, the need for taxi scripts was off the charts. And that's why every year those groups were asking for more and more taxi scripts. If we've caught up now, that's wonderful, but I see the justification for them because apparently, Tom, am I correct that they do run out almost every year?
Yes, Chair, I believe they do.
Okay.
So the need for the taxi scripts does run out every year. So again, thank you for putting the process that we're planning them. One of the discussion topics that we touched base on through an email is regular meetings. We're looking at a regular meeting date and having every quarter, I believe, was suggested. And is anybody against that? So clerks, we will send out a council thing for the next quarter. Thank you. And is there any other business? Okay, seeing none. The next meeting, again, the clerks will probably do a doodle poll, and then we'll probably do it every, 3 months from that. Are Friday afternoons good, or do we want to try another day, or?
Friday afternoon on a long weekend isn't the best.
Okay, so we'll now vote to adjourn the Licensing and Hearing Committee meeting. Is there any mover or seconder, please? Councillor Chair Redmond, Councillor Nowak?
Yep.
And now start the vote, please.
In favor.
That's carried. Thank you all. Have a wonderful Family Day weekend and take care.